Hello, everyone, and thank you for spending some time with us tonight. My name is Steve Sattler, and I will be your host this evening. The last time Betsy Wilson spoke on Artist Spotlight, the webinar, the feedback was just outstanding. This time, the registration numbers are doing all the talking. We've got one of the highest we've ever had. Over 890 folks have signed up for tonight's presentation. And that's what happens when a speaker is engaging and knowledgeable and actually teaches you things you can use. Tonight, Betsy's here to help us master capturing motion. And we are so pleased Betsy accepted our invitation to speak tonight. Well, for those of you who are not familiar with Betsy, Betsy began learning photography after retiring from a career as a newspaper publisher. Betsy's husband, Jim, gave her his hand-me-down camera and a lot of encouragement, and now he says he created a monster. Betsy's passion for photography includes a wide variety of photographic types, including macro, landscape, and nature photography. In addition to being honored as Photographer of the Year at the Chester County Camera Club in Pennsylvania, Betsy has received numerous recognitions for her artistic photography, including a silver medal awarded at the Wilmington International Exhibition of Photography and first place award in photography at the prestigious Philadelphia Flower Show. Betsy is an active member of the Chester County Camera Club in Pennsylvania and has given numerous presentations to camera clubs across the country. And it's now my honor to bring to the Artist Spotlight webinar stage Betsy Wilson. Betsy, come on down.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that wonderful introduction.
And I told you I'd say, come on down.
And you did.
So again, thank you so much for honoring us with your giving a presentation to our team. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, again, thank you so much for inviting me back again. I'm just so excited to share this presentation with all of you. I will take a pause about halfway through the presentation to see if there are any questions in the chat. So as we go along, if you have a question, just type it in the chat and we'll take a short break there and then continue on, and we'll open it up for any questions again at the end. So motion photography. There are so many different interpretations. We can freeze a moment in time. We can capture a special moment. Use techniques to manipulate motion or stretch it out. Motion can see things in a different way. And we can use motion maybe to create a mood or a feeling. So here are some of the motion techniques that I will cover. I'm going to be talking about freezing action, long exposure, panning and zooming are quite fun, a technique called rear curtain sync. Can't talk about photographing motion unless you talk about photographing water. We'll touch on some neutral density filters, light painting motion, a fun toy called a pixel stick, and I will wrap up with some fun tricks and some Photoshop ideas to simulate motion. And most of the images I will show are mine, but I have included some by my husband, Jim. He's the guilty party that got me into photography some years ago. He's a very talented photographer. He's also my technical support. I tend to focus more on the artistic side of things, and I can sometimes be a little bit technically challenged. And I find it's always a challenge creating a presentation for a diverse audience with all different levels of experience. I'm sure, like most camera clubs, many of you on this call are just starting out and want to learn the basics. And I know that there are very many very experienced and talented photographers. So I'll start out with some basics and gradually add some more advanced techniques. And there is always something new to learn and some new technique to try out. Most of this presentation will involve in-camera techniques. I will finish up with some post-processing ideas. And I like to start with a little bit of history. And you may be familiar with this famous photograph by Henri Cartier-Bresson. It's often used to illustrate what is known as the decisive moment, when the visual and psychological elements in a scene, they just briefly come together. Not only did he capture the motion with the man's feet suspended above the water, but look at how the reflection in the water mirrors the image in a circus poster in the background. And I love this image of a cyclist. So it's believed that he would find his composition and wait for the cyclist to move into that exact desired position, another decisive moment. So these are examples of freezing a moment in time. Let's move on to an image that shows motion, and we're going to settle a little wager. So it was quite some time ago. This businessman owned racehorses. He needed to settle a little bet with some of his buddies because he said when his horse was racing, all four legs came off the ground at the same time. No one had ever seen that happen, so no one believed it. Well, he paid photographer Edward Muybridge to prove his point. And Muybridge set up a series of 12 cameras along the track that were triggered by the horse, that tripped the wires, and that triggered the shutter release. And as you can see, he won his bet. In that third image on the top, all four legs are off the ground. So let's move to a single image that shows motion. Philadelphia artist Thomas Eakins, he was also a photographer. He developed his own method with the goal of studying anatomy to further his paintings. So whereas Muybridge's system relied on that series of cameras triggered to produce multiple photos, Eakins used just a single camera to produce a series of exposures superimposed on one negative. And I want to mention one more. It was a 25-year-old Ansel Adams when he created this image of the monolith of Half Dome. And he first used a yellow filter to darken the sky a bit. But his experience of what he saw, it was more dramatic than he knew he would get from that yellow filter. Well, after hiking up a mountain with heavy gear, he had only one glass plate left, and he tried a new red filter, hoping it would darken the sky to create the image he imagined or visualized. This experiment, it actually proved to be a turning point for Ansel Adams because for the first time, he was conscious of the difference between what his camera lens saw and what he saw in his mind's eye as the final print. He discovered photographic visualization, a concept I'll mention again later. So we will be talking a lot about freezing time or capturing a period of time, either using a fast shutter speed or a slow shutter speed. Most cameras have a dial mode, shutter priority marked on it. So set your dial to either S for shutter, or on some cameras, it's TV for time value to activate shutter priority mode. This means you tell the camera how long you want the exposure to be. And in most cases, you let the camera decide the rest. So let's start with the most basic of techniques of motion photography, freezing action. And fast exposures can freeze actions that happen faster than the blink of an eye. This was shot at 1/2000th of a second. And a lot of people ask about settings, so I will include the aperture and ISO on many of these images. But the most important factor here is shutter speed. A skateboarder in Central Park, frozen in midair at 1/500th of a second. This is my husband, Jim, tossing cherry blossoms in the air. More skateboard antics. This one was taken by Jim. And I like to imagine what thoughts must be going through the minds of this couple in the water with their feet in the air. Fast shutter speeds are almost always used to capture sports events, to freeze the action. But in addition to sports, there are other fleeting moments that the only way to capture is with a fast shutter speed. I don't know if any of you have attempted to photograph frozen soap bubbles. I tried and failed numerous times before getting it, because if it isn't cold enough or if there's any wind, your bubbles will pop before you have a chance to push the shutter. And be prepared to freeze your fingers off to get this shot. I think it has to be like 19 degrees or lower to have this happen. And you have to be fast because they usually don't last long. I was happy to get this one right at that moment of exploding. But if you can capture these elusive bubbles, you may get some beautiful crystal formations like these. I was able to line this bubble up in front of that early morning rising sun. And when photographing wildlife, like this grizzly bear in British Columbia, I wanted to be sure to freeze any movement to get a sharp image. 1/500th of a second can freeze action. For faster action like birds in flight, you probably want to go with 1/1000th, maybe 1/2000th of a second. So again, these images are all taken with the camera set to shutter priority. A hippo thrashing about while sparring with another hippo. He was moving very fast, so a very fast shutter speed was used to freeze the action. And I want to point out the magic of a fast shutter speed. I'm not a bird photographer, but I did have a goal of capturing a hummingbird, so at least I got these shots. I included this to make a point about motion. Think about the speed of a hummingbird's wings. They flap, or actually they make a figure-8 movement, an average of 50 times per second, much faster than you can see with your eyes. So, think about that bet on the feet of the racehorse. People had never actually seen all 4 feet in the air. Without high-speed photography, we would never see the wing of a hummingbird in flight. A great place to practice capturing motion, not far from where I live, is Middle Creek Wildlife Management Area in Pennsylvania. Because in late February and early March, tens of thousands of beautiful snow geese stop here. It's an amazing sight and sound when they all lift up in unison, and close to sunset, they all fly in from the fields to roost on the lake for the night. This is a good example of what your camera can see, but your eye cannot. Like a ceiling fan spinning around and you can't see the individual fan blades, these snow geese, they flew and they circled, and when you're there, you experience this amazing motion, but your eye cannot freeze and see the scene like your camera can. These are tundra swans at Middle Creek, quite graceful when flying overhead. And another fast shutter speed to freeze the action of a street performer. So Jim and I were fortunate to go on a photography trip to Cuba, where we visited a local dance studio, and it was dim in the room, bright light pouring in from back windows. As you can see here, not the best lighting conditions. So in this case, I set my camera. It was a Sony a6000. I put it on an automatic preset called Sport Mode, which basically means the camera would pick all the settings needed to freeze the action. So it has a very high ISO of 3200, which can create some noise or a grainy look. But for me, I would prefer to have some noise in the image and be able to capture unique dance actions rather than have a perfect quality shot but miss the whole point. And we also attended a performance by a Santeria dance troupe. Santeria is an Afro-Cuban religion. The dancers perform this frenzied, trance-like dance to drums that's fascinating to watch. And at 1/200th of a second, it was fast enough to freeze most of the action, but you start to see a bit of blur on the dress and the hair. These images were all done in natural light. 1/350th of a second, still a pretty slow shutter speed to freeze this intense action. In natural light, the dancer certainly would be blurred, but she is frozen in midair because I used an external flash. So up until that last image, all those examples were done with natural light, no flash, but the burst of a flash is much faster than the shutter speed of your camera. So to really capture high-speed movement, it's best to use a flash. Although the shutter speed here is 1/250th of a second, the motion is frozen by the flash, which is actually faster, as fast as maybe 1/10,000th of a second. So these were done just by dropping colorful objects into a fish tank. And yeah, you do need to pre-focus where you think your subject will be, as it happens way too fast for any kind of autofocus to work. And here are some other items that I played with. Look around your house. See what you can experiment with. Or get in the action yourself. And don't be afraid to get wet. Again, at 1/60th of a second, you would not freeze these bubbles unless you used a flash. So if you do want to try this, again, there are full instructions on our website, which will be shared at the end. And if you don't have a fish tank or an external flash, you can still create images like these just using seltzer water and a side light. Capturing the motion of smoke is fun. Just burn some incense and use a flash. And with high-speed flash, you can capture the splash of water droplets colliding. You do need special timing equipment for shots like this, which we don't have. I shot these at a local workshop. And here you can see the gear. It's pretty complex. It's a setup with colored water dropping from above and water shooting up from below so that they collide. And you can see there are multiple flashes set up. But while at the same workshop, we played with high-speed flash while smashing things like wine glasses or shooting a pretzel with a BB gun. And yeah, we made quite a mess. So if you look on the bottom right there, you can see the BB coming out of the backside of the egg. And then we had some fun with high-speed flash. We were throwing darts at water balloons. So this was a kind of a crazy fun workshop. All right, so images can be recorded at a fraction of a second or over much longer periods of time. Fraction of a second, that movement is frozen, but now it is slowed down to 1/15 of a second, introducing some blur, allowing the camera to capture the movement of the birds. So even with wildlife, longer shutter speeds, I think it can lead to surprising new images. I just love to experiment with different shutter speeds to make creative photographs. Fast shutter speed, slower shutter speed. And neither one is right or wrong. It just depends on what you want to convey. I love this capture by Jim. It is one of those snow geese at Middle Creek. Here's one of mine, quite surreal, a bit haunting maybe. Or slow that shutter down a bit to capture the motion of snow flying in an open window. If I had shot this at 1/500th of a second or faster, the snow would have been captured as tiny specks instead of these streaks, which gives more of a feel of motion. And time exposures can allow us to record things that we can't see with the naked eye. We can stretch out those streaks of light, the headlights on the left, the taillights on the right. And I love trying to capture a mix of static objects and moving objects, the people standing motionless while the train speeds by. And with a long shutter speed, people in motion, they take on ghost-like qualities. Quite abstract, but you can still tell this is a train speeding by. And this is a highway. The cars they're probably doing about 60 miles per hour. A 2-second exposure captured those streaks of light. But in a small downtown, cars were moving much slower. This was a full 8 seconds. So the camera is on a tripod, a must when doing an 8-second exposure. And this is from the same downtown. I'm on the roof of the public parking lot, and the roof has this high cement wall around it. So I actually had to raise the tripod in the air and brace the tripod legs against the wall to get the camera high enough to get this shot. I basically had to guess at the direction of the camera. Lucky guess, I think. All right, so let's move on to setting up the scene and waiting for something to happen, like Henri Cartier-Bresson's famous image. It's believed that he would scout out his composition, then wait to capture that precisely timed, meaningful moment. Find a good location, wait for a subject to enter the frame, and complete the composition. Here are a series of images by my husband, Jim. We were at a reenactment of the Revolutionary War, Battle of the Brandywine. He was attracted to the repeating patterns of the soldiers' tents. And by moving around, he framed this nice composition of these leading lines going through these 2 rows of tents. And every so often, some of the soldiers would walk through the frame. So he just stayed there for a while, hoping to capture someone of interest at just the right moment. And there it is. When this young soldier walked through with the drum on his back, he felt he had something special. And I agree. I had the same idea in Cuba. I was fascinated by the colors, the shapes on the painted wall, the peeling paint on the door. So I sat on the curb across the street, watched the people going by, and this guy in the pink cap, he wasn't going anywhere. Then I noticed that the low sun was creating some dramatic shadows. Oh, can I get the man with the cap perhaps showing an interaction with a shadow? And then it happened. My finished shot, graphically pleasing. I love the story and the expression on this man's face. Another example by Jim at Grand Central Terminal in New York. Bright sunlight was pouring in at a low angle, creating long shadows. So he positioned himself in the middle of the commotion and waited, and he started out by framing the people. Then he tilted the camera down. He started to focus less on the people and more on the shadows, just waiting for something interesting. And here it is. This was the decisive moment. The foot on the left, the foot on the right, both lifted off the floor, showing the movement. And the shadow, that shadow of the little girl holding her father's hand, captured the moment he was waiting for. All right, so up until now, we have held the camera steady and either frozen motion or allowed motion to move and be captured. Let's shake that up a bit. Now we move the camera. Intentional camera movement, or ICM as it is sometimes referred to, is a different branch of photography altogether. And the final result, it produces a blurred, colorful, abstract image on purpose. Think of it as being like an expressionist painter. And panning is one of the most popular ICM techniques. It's easy and it's fun. Just using a slower shutter speed, maybe 1/30th, 1/15th of a second, you just swipe your camera up or down. You are panning your subject, sometimes called swipes. And part of the fun of panning is that you never really know how the image will turn out. Another example of how our eyes and the camera see things differently. You know, if you look at a tree with your eyes and move your head up and down, you will likely still see the tree well defined, but the camera doesn't. It sees a blur. And you can do this with a tripod, but I usually do it handheld. I'll actually brace my elbows against my sides to try to keep the camera as steady as possible. And trees, I think, work quite well, as although you get this dreamy, surreal image, you still recognize the subject. It takes a lot of experimentation, and you do need to be prepared to delete a lot of misses. This one does have a bit of a shake to it, giving it a different sort of staccato or jumpy feel. But it doesn't have to be trees. This effect can work well with flowers. You probably recognize this is of tulips. And I like to just plop down on the ground and play with this technique. I really like the abstract movement effect. Not recognizable, but very abstract. A very colorful bunch of autumn leaves. And I like to experiment with other subjects, go beyond nature. There's this old steel factory near us called Steel Stacks, and I love photographing the structures, the colorful rust. You know, the colors, the patterns, the textures are fantastic. How about a motion blur here? Very abstract, but beautiful. The Naval Shipyard in Philadelphia, just a small panning blur gives a ghost-like effect. The ocean, now the panning is horizontal. So on all these examples, the camera is moving, but the subject is not. Let's go back to Cuba, a different kind of panning. Now, both the subject and the camera are moving. We follow our subject with the camera, and this allows us to get the subject relatively sharp and blur the background. And you try to match the subject's rate of movement and the direction in which it's traveling. And you're swiveling your camera along a parallel axis to the moving subject. You hope to get at least a part of your subject in focus. So these colorful old cars, they were a distance away from me. So I'm panning at about this speed. I'm going swipe, swipe. Now it gets really crazy. At the velodrome in Pennsylvania, these cyclists were very close to my camera, so the panning had to take place much faster. Now I'm going like this, swipe, swipe. So, all you see in focus is this guy's knee and then this explosion of motion in front and behind. And you get some crazy stuff, quite surreal, but I really love the effect here created by the spinning of the spokes. So if you want to try this, again, have your camera on shutter priority. And I start usually with 1/30th of a second, maybe 1/15th of a second. And it depends on how far you are from your subject and how quickly your subject is moving. And you just keep practicing and practicing. And a tip, it helps if you keep following your subject even after you stop shooting so you don't prematurely drop your camera. And be prepared to take lots of frames, which most will be throwaways. But I enjoy surprises of bizarre, somewhat ghostly images like this. And here are a few I took at a local cyclocross event. So much fun to watch and photograph. Here I love how the wheels just disappear into the track. And this guy was coming down a hill, so I had to pan on a diagonal motion. That was new for me. And I got pretty messy getting this one. It had rained the day before, which made a muddy mess, but it was lots of fun to watch. And I just really like this one, the clear impression of speed, a colorful and strong composition. Another great place to try motion panning is at a carousel. Again, it's hard to get your subject mostly in focus while quickly following it with your camera. And I am really just starting to embrace cell phone photography, but I'm loving this app called Slow Shutter Cam. Results can vary, of course, but it tends to, you can change a setting on it and it will create this somewhat jumpy, sort of repeating motion pattern that I think results in quite an impressionistic look. I really like that. And what a fantastic opportunity to be at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. In my dreams, I was watching it on TV and I thought, oh, I would just love to be in the camera that goes along with those amazing runners. And then I realized from my living room couch, I kind of was in the camera car. And I wondered, can I do some panning motion? Why not try? I slowed my shutter speed down to 1/10 of a second. I took a gazillion bad shots, but I got a few that I liked. And technically, these are not my shots, as I am shooting from video taken by another photographer. So I won't be entering these into a competition. But I am still experimenting with yet another way to capture motion. That's how I learn. Now let's add a new twist to intentional camera motion. And by new twist, I mean that literally. A normal picture of a colorful autumn tree. But if we twist our zoom lens, you get this wonderful zoom motion. Just zoom in or out, either way, while the shutter is open. And autumn trees with no zoom, now with a slight zoom. This has quite an impressionistic look. Cityscapes can be fun. Just a subtle zoom on neon lights for a new look. Or try a rotation blur. Just spin your entire camera gently while the shutter is open. I do this a lot, by the way. I didn't even know I took this shot. Not sure if you would call this a zoom or panning or what. I was up on a ladder to get above this field of sunflowers. I must have pushed the shutter button on the way down, but it's kind of fun. I actually call this UCM, unintentional camera movement. And a perfect time to practice these motion techniques is right now with holiday lights. So here's the traditional Christmas tree shot. But watch what happens. Watch what happens after I have a glass of wine. It's having a bit more fun. Oh, I like that. I think I'll have another. And with some more wine, it's really starting to party. Disco party. Okay, so this one may have been after maybe a little bit too much wine. It's actually a combination of a zoom and rotating the camera at the same time. Again, a combination, panning, twisting, and a zoom blur. Basically a hangover. So these are actually holiday lights on an outdoor tree. I had read an article about Olympus, by Olympus, about doing these rotational blurs and decided to try it out. I put the camera underneath a lit tree and spun the camera and a crop of one of my experiments, very abstract, but I like how you can see the effect of the pulsating lights. So this whole setup, it was hard to do, to try to get the camera on a tripod pointing straight up. So as usual, I wound up with some surprises. It was freezing cold out, and I probably hit the shutter with my gloves on and didn't know it. I think that's a happy accident. I like it. All right, let's move on to water, because we can't have a conversation about motion photography without talking about water. I think water is probably one of the best subjects to experiment with different shutter speeds to get very different results. Fast shutter speed to capture and freeze the motion of water flowing over a sand dollar, or slowed down to freeze the subject, but show the blur of the moving tide as the water sweeps back to the ocean. But be sure to hold onto your tripod. I almost lost a camera on this one. This one's somewhere in between at 1/10 of a second. The splashes hitting the rocks appear stretched out and are emphasized. And this great blue heron flying in one direction above rapids flowing in a different direction. To freeze the motion, a very high shutter speed was needed. And of course, we have to talk about waterfalls. How do you get that smooth, silky water flow? Some call it a cotton candy look. Do you want to get that look? That's up to you. Here you can see the detail in the water, the crunchiness of it. Same scene with the shutter opened longer, with that silky look to the waterfall. And keep in mind, neither approach is right or wrong, whichever you like. Waterfalls using different shutter speeds. Let me take you through these. This is actually the same water flowing at different shutter speeds. I started at 1/1000th of a second, exact same place, slowed down to 1/15th of a second. Now I'm at 1/6 of a second. Now at a full half a minute. So I show you these to let you see that you as an artist, you can decide which look you're trying to get, and now you know how to obtain that. But now let's also get into how shutter speed affects exposure, because the more time that shutter is open, the more light comes into your camera. So for these examples, I have switched to manual mode, which means I am in control of all the camera settings. I started out at 1/250th of a second, froze the moving water, notice sort of that crunchiness in the foreground. Now at 1/15th of a second, a blur starts to occur, still fairly sharp in that pool area in the center. It's a bit overexposed, but that could be adjusted by lowering the ISO. Now a full second, notice swirls start to form in the pool. The waterfall and cascading water in the foreground are taking on a smoother appearance. Now at 2 seconds, even more motion is captured, but it's a bit overexposed. My ISO is 200. Let's cut that to 100 and see what happens. Same 2 seconds, so the look of the water is basically the same, but at ISO, the exposure looks good. So what happens if we go to 4 seconds to go for that really smooth cotton candy look? So much light is now coming in, the image is overexposed. I'm already at the lowest ISO. Now I know many of you know you could change the f-stop, but for this example, I'll leave that constant. Instead, I will add a neutral density filter to the front of the lens, kind of like putting on sunglasses. That will cut down the light. Yes, by adding that filter to cut down some light, the exposure now looks much better. I now have that smooth, dreamy look to the water. Again, maybe too much smoothing out of the water for you. That's up to you. A few more waterfalls. To be sure the surrounding landscape is in focus during a long exposure, a tripod is essential. I can now check this one off my bucket list. Spectacular, very popular waterfall in Oregon. One of the largest waterfalls in Iceland. This one has a drop of almost 200 feet. And you can walk right up to the base of it. You get wet, but it's worth it. And I love this lone figure, just dwarfed by the power of nature. And maybe some of you have been to Thunder Hole in Acadia in Maine. The waves rush into a small cavern. The water is forced out with this thunderous roar, hence the name Thunder Hole. This is not a particularly safe spot for this man to be standing. Some years ago, 3 people were on the rocks when a rogue wave came up wash them out to sea. Very powerful force of water. Very different image of water, flowing and serene. This was of the swells created off the back of a powerboat. And if you hold your camera down low, you can capture the beautiful shapes of the undulating waves. Fascinating fountains at Longwood Gardens in Pennsylvania. They don't allow tripods during their fountain show, so this is handheld. I was somewhat far away. You can see this has a very high ISO of 16,000, which creates some noise or that grainy look, but it doesn't bother me. And we don't always have perfect weather conditions. While photographing at a Pennsylvania state park, Jim and I took car in our cover just before this huge storm blew through. So we were trapped in the car. What do? I took shots through the windshield of the pouring rain at varying shutter speeds. And when the rain let up, I captured this graceful flow of water. This was taken on a bright, sunny day. There was a sprinkler going. The sunlight highlighted those streaks of water. And I just turned a bit. This is the effect of two sprinklers crossing paths. And this one may be a bit difficult to figure out. You get the sense of water flowing, but the image, it's a bit abstract. Is that some kind of a rabbit from Mars swimming through rapids? Well, it's actually simulated motion, as in reality, nothing is moving. It might start to make sense in its original vertical orientation. It's a macro image of an icicle. Still talking about water, Jim and I do all sorts of wacky photo experiments, and we wanted to capture wine splashing up the side of a wine glass. You may have seen this on some wine labels, like the expensive wine that I buy that comes in the big cardboard box. So Jim built this ramp, put this wooden stop at the bottom, so when the glasses slid down, they would hit it, causing the liquid to flow up and out of the side of the glass. And it took a lot of practice. We're getting closer, almost there. Yeah, that's kind of what we're going for. So time to add some food coloring. Oops, we had a casualty. Okay, now we're getting there. And we got some random splashes. Finally got a good one. Just cropped in tighter for the final image and gave it a high key look. A great way to capture motion using water is with reflections. Maybe nothing is moving, but it certainly looks like it is. Another reflection. And this, I think, gives the feel of a panning motion blur, but it's just the distortion from the slight movement of the water. Quite impressionistic. Or quite abstract. The reflection of a windjammer in Maine. Okay, here comes another mistake. So Jim and I were paddling our canoe back from a twilight canoe trip, and I was intrigued by the reflections from the houses on the lake. I'm in the front of the canoe with my camera. Jim is in the back paddling. I think he intentionally rocked the boat, and this is what I got. But I love it. I think it looks like curved Asian boats in front of a mountain range. Quite peaceful, almost mystical. I do want to describe a bit more about neutral density filters, as they can make quite a difference. The ocean in Acadia hitting the rocks, you can see that crunchy detail at 1/25th of a second. Maybe you want to go for a different look, smooth that water out a bit, but going to a full 6 seconds on a bright sunny day, it would look something like this. Way too much light is coming into your camera. You can't adjust any settings to get a good exposure when your shutter is letting in bright sunlight for a full 6 seconds. So you have to put those sunglasses on the front of your lens. You add a neutral density filter. Okay, these come in different thicknesses of darkness. This is a 2-stop neutral density filter. If I want, you can stack them. I can put it with a 6-stop neutral density filter. So now you can see it's even darker. Sun clouds take on a mysterious feel when stretched out by using a neutral density filter and a long exposure. So on all these, I'm using the same f-stop and ISO, only the time changes, okay? I started out at 1/125th of a second, then 8 seconds, that's a long time. Same clouds, look what they look like at a full 30 seconds. And this is actually the exact same image, just converted to black and white, because I really like this look in black and white. A beautiful sunset on the Philadelphia skyline. And I like these clouds, but they take on a whole different look when stretched out over 3 minutes. And again, I really like black and white with this look. Okay, we are done with water, something different. How would you go about capturing the motion of tiny dandelion seeds flying off flower heads? It's called scanning. The camera is a flatbed scanner, just a scanner we bought to scan documents called a Canon CanoScan. Image on the left shows how tomatoes and onions were placed on the scanner. This is the resulting image on the right. Notice that everything is not only upside down, it's backwards. And here is how I use this to simulate motion. This is jewelweed, and as a child, I loved gently trying to grab the seed pods and then letting them pop open in my hand because it makes these spring things that shoot the seeds out. So I just laid the pieces on the scanner to make it look like an exploding plant. Lettuce, tomatoes, and peppers gently falling to create this beautiful salad. Well, this is actually a composite of 2 images, as the floating veggies were done on the scanner, and the bowl was just a straight on camera shot. Then the 2 were combined in Photoshop. Some more scanning. How about a fireworks explosion of hosta buds? Okay, now I'm getting a little bit kooky here. I took a CD and pulled it down along the scanner as the light followed it down. I placed some old keys, an antique stopwatch, and some beautiful chrysanthemums on the scanner. But I wondered what would happen if I left them on the scanner and did a scan every day for 3 weeks. So watch carefully, and you will see the flowers start to change, to wither. Their color starts to fade to brown. I just love experimenting any way I can think of to simulate motion. And with scanning, you can simulate the magic of dandelion seeds floating away. I don't know how you could capture this out in a field. So we're past the halfway point. Let me take a short pause here and find out if there are any questions in the chat, and it gives me an opportunity to get a drink of water. So Sandy, are you there with anything in the chat?
I am. Well, Betsy, as I know I've said before, I just find you so easy to learn from. You teach so well, and I think people in our audience will agree with me. What I loved was your wine-induced creativity. Thank you so much. Anyway, Betsy, thank you. And we do have a few questions about the workshops. Let me see. Would you share who put on the high-speed flash workshop?
Sure. There is a place in Westchester, Pennsylvania, close to where I live, called the Photography Workshop, run by a very talented gentleman named Mark Bergfist. So if you just want to Google the Photography Workshop, there may be more than one of them with that name, but it's in Pennsylvania, in Chester County, Pennsylvania. And he runs all sorts of different workshops for beginners who want to learn Lightroom, and macro workshops and all sorts of things. So if anyone's in the area, look up the Photography Workshop.
Great. And Lynn Roberts has asked I'm sorry, I'm losing my place here. With the scanner, do you put a piece of black paper over your subject?
Yeah, you notice that most of the scans have a very dark background. No, I do not put anything dark over them. No, I don't close the lid. The lid is wide open. I do this in daylight in a room. I will avoid a bright light right overhead. But you get that black background because the light is so close to the subject that it falls off quickly. So think of a scanner. The light travels in this band right below the glass, which is just a fraction of an inch away from the object lying on the glass. So the light falls off to darkness very quickly. Pretty cool.
Great. When you did the birds with slow shutter speed, did you use a tripod?
No.
Okay, that was at the beginning of the presentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I suppose you could. That might help someone to steady their camera, I guess. But we were out with those birds flying everywhere, and we were moving this way and that way. If you had it on a tripod, I find that kind of stifling to be able to get where the bird is quickly.
Mm-hmm. What size scanner are you using?
What size scanner am I using? Well, can you see this? That's it. It's a Canon scan. Again, we got it just for household documents. A lot of people have these in their homes and don't even know it. Sometimes they're a combination fax copier, that type of thing, or if you work in an office, you may have access to one in an office. They're pretty common. And by the way, on my website at the end, there is a link on our website where all the information about the scanning is there if you want to try it.
Good. And I will be including toward the end of the presentation the links in the chat room. Plus, we have a file for them to download. So great.
Excellent.
Why shoot in shutter priority versus manual when you control all three ISO f-stop shutter speed? Why choose shutter speed?
I guess the short answer is it's easier for me. I do shoot in manual sometimes, and I know there are many very experienced and accomplished photographers who only shoot in manual. I find it easier myself to just put it in shutter priority and let the camera do the rest. That's
good. Sounds smart. One last question. What you use different settings when doing ICM, intentional camera movement. What settings would you recommend?
Again, putting it in shutter priority, because what you want to control with ICM is how long your shutter is open. That's sort of the key for ICM. And it depends what you're shooting, but if you want to try some of those swirls and things with the Christmas lights, I usually go with maybe 1/10, 1/15 of a second. That's what I would recommend. But give it a try. If you don't like it, try something different.
Great. And so what I'm going to do is save the rest. I see more coming in, and we are going to move on in the presentation. I will ask them at the end.
Sounds good.
But I also want you to know people are really commenting on how much they're enjoying this. So
good.
Let's go back to the show.
All right, more to come. And let's move on to rear curtain sync. When shooting with flash and using a slow shutter speed, you can record movement and freeze it at the same time. So here I held up 4 golf balls. Jim opened the shutter. I dropped them. So while the shutter's open, they bounce down, back up, suspended for a fraction of a second before coming back down, flash to freeze them. So that flash where you see those 4 white balls, that's when the flash went off. So I did a selfie here with a 10-second delay on the timer. There is a setting in most cameras called rear curtain sync. So basically when you take a shot, the first curtain opens, letting light into your camera. Then at the end of the exposure, the second curtain closes, and then they reset, get ready for the next shot. Well, with rear curtain sync, while the curtain is open, it's exposing the image while I flail about in ambient light, and then a flash goes off right before that second curtain closes, or at the end of your exposure. So you can see the motion as I move around, and then the flash goes off at the end, so something is in focus. So I experimented with some light sticks and probably some wine, and while Jim is in that next room trying to ignore me. So you get the idea of a combination of motion blur and something sharp. And Jim and I played around with this, trying to make it work. This is a 2-second exposure as I moved through the frame. Flash went off at the end. I kind of like this one. I think it looks like my hair flew off. And we had this mottled gray background set up, which is why you see this smoky textured look. And I like the textured look, but this isn't quite what we were trying to achieve. So I asked for a black background for my birthday. This is the look that we wanted to create with that black background. And I relied on Jim as the lighting expert. So to the right of this image is a continuous light in a softbox to diffuse and spread the light. That provided the light as I'm moving through the frame. Then on the left is a speed light that fires at the end of the exposure to freeze the action. Another from the same photo shoot. Jim says I look like an angel. Ha! Okay, LAPP, or Light Art Performance Photography. Not only a mouthful, it's a style in which you literally paint your pictures with light. Now, this is fun, and the crazy part is, it is created with only one picture. No Photoshop skills needed. You just grab a light and experiment. So if I was in a real room with you, I would ask you to guess how I did this. I'm sure some of you can guess. We attached a string of LED lights to a canoe paddle. This is the motion of the paddle as Jim paddles in the dark, and I take a 30-second shot. And another done the same way. And some of you have probably done this, fire spinning. It's done by swinging steel wool that's been set on fire. Our camera club hosted a workshop, and we did this in a safe location. It was at a firefighter training location. And with a slow shutter speed of 10 seconds, you capture this rain of sparks flying down. So, of course, Jim and I had to try something similar at home. Now, Jim has me holding a grinder on a piece of sheet metal to create these flying sparks. This is actually another example of rear curtain sync, as it's a long exposure of half a second to show that spray of those flying sparks, and then the flash went off at the end to light me at the end of the exposure. And then the next thing I know, Jim asked me to wear my dark exercise clothes, and then he's wrapping colorful string lights around me. Now what is he trying to do? This. He had me run through the frame when it was dark enough. So again, a combination of light painting, or that LAPP, and rear curtain sync as the flash was burst at the end to freeze the image of me.
Betsy?
Yeah.
I believe your camera is off. Right now we're just seeing white screen.
Oh, no. Okay. Should I stop sharing and share again? I mean, I didn't.
Yeah, try that first, and if not, we'll have you log out and log back in.
Okay. And how long has it been doing that?
Just started.
Okay.
Within the last 15 seconds or so.
All right. Let me go with stop. Yeah, just Jim came in too. Just did stop sharing. And now I don't know how to get back.
It appears you're not even in the system here right now, too. So you might want to log out and log back in.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Well, I think I'm gone altogether. Okay.
Oh, there you are.
I'm there.
You're
Okay.
back in. Okay. Go ahead and try to share your screen once again.
Okay. Window.
Okay.
Is it there?
It's there. Just go ahead, put it in show mode, and we're back.
Okay, good.
That's where
All
we
right.
left off. Okay.
So tell me when you saw this.
We saw that. We saw that. And that was it. We didn't see that.
Okay. So when Jim had me, dress up in my exercise clothes and all this, I'm saying, what the heck is he trying to do? This was what he was trying to do. Had me run through the frame when it got dark. So again, a combination of all these things. If that flash had not gone off at the end, you would not see my face or my hand. You would just see those colorful lights. But pretty crazy, huh? All right, so this one usually stumps people. How was this done? Well, we have a friend, Charles, who loves playing with all sorts of toys to create light motion. He did a workshop for our club. You can see here, it's a bicycle tire, right? With lights placed around the rim. And here you can see it in the dark and get the idea of how it spins on the floor, 4 seconds for it to go around in one rotation. And this is Charles just walking through the frame in the dark while moving the bicycle wheel around. Charles is holding his lightsaber, and this image gives you an idea of what's going on. This is what the image looks like in the dark. Here's my husband, Jim, again. Isn't he a good sport? So for this one, our friend Charles was walking around Jim. He was waving this red flashlight wand. My camera was set on bulb mode, meaning the shutter was opened with a remote cable and left open until Charles was finished painting with light. And when he said stop, the remote button was pushed again to end the exposure. That's why you see that strange 53 seconds. All right, now let's talk about long exposure, but with multiple flashes. Now we paint with bursts of light. This is a single frame, just 2 dancers. Tripod is a must. Set it up in pre-focus, then turn out the lights, leave the shutter open for 8 seconds. Burst of a flash from a speed light was manually triggered 4 times to freeze the dancers in motion. Also 8 seconds, the flash was shot 5 times. So again, so we're in the dark and it's going flash, 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 flash as the dancers move through. So this was also done at a workshop by our friend Charles. But of course, Jim and I have to try this at home. So this was done with a Canon Speedlight set in multi-mode, which means it was preset to fire 5 bursts per second over 3 seconds. So 15 bursts of light. Here's a rather surreal image, but this is what it started out like. And I wanted you to know that we made many attempts at this, and most were just sort of a confusing jumble, kind of hard to tell what the heck you're looking at. But I rather liked just the jumble of hands, so I decided to crop in on just that. I think that made a nice image. So we experimented. This one worked a bit better. Jim lowered the number of flash bursts from 15 down to 9. Now it's a bit less jumbled. I think I'm about to punch myself in the face. And we again experimented at a Camera Club flash workshop. Here we have multiple flashes going off while the skeleton was slowly pushed across the floor in a chair with wheels on it. So Jim and I brought along the model. We call him Uncle Dudley. And I don't remember who had the idea to put shades on Uncle Dudley. To me, this reminds me of Men in Black. Pixel stick. Well, Jim was awarded this toy at one of our Camera Club presentations, and there are actually 200 tiny LED lights along the edge of this stick. The Pixel stick comes with a dozen built-in patterns, different colors, rainbow patterns. And if you wave the stick about a bit while walking, it creates these really cool patterns. So this is that pre-programmed rainbow pattern. And you can create fun stuff like this. Here, Jim asked me actually to hold the Pixel stick close to the ground and walk through our woods. Let's add a person to the shot. We asked our friend to pose as still as possible while we walked behind her with the Pixel stick so she appears as a silhouette. Remember that rear curtain flash? Now we have used that technique with the Pixel stick. So if you look on the far left of this image, you can actually see that's me as I'm finishing up walking that Pixel stick behind Jim. And at the end of the exposure, we've added that flash, so Jim has been lit up. Another example, this time I am the subject. But here is where it really gets crazy. You can load your own image into the Pixel stick. So each one of its little 200 LEDs, it acts like a pixel on a screen, displaying your image one vertical line at a time as you walk. So here we have our friend Bob set up like he's raising a glass to himself. We already had this picture of Bob and downloaded it into the Pixel stick. So we asked Bob to sit in the dark, hold up his beer bottle and sit still. He had no idea what we were doing. That other image of Bob is in the stick. And as Jim walks by, slices of the photo flash. All you see at the time is this weird stick that is blinking lights. And then when Jim was done walking with the stick, we lit Bob with a burst of flash. Alas, the end result is real Bob and virtual Bob together. This is a single frame. It is not photoshopped. For this one, I am actually sitting in a canoe that's on a picnic table. Jim builds and restores wooden canoes. This is one that he built. An image of the ocean was loaded into the pixel stick, and then Jim walked by twice, once with the ocean image on the stick behind me, and then again in front of me. And here, Jim loaded a creepy picture of himself and walked it behind me. He told me to look scared. I had no idea what image was on this stick, but he's right. He looks creepy. All right, what if you are the motion? Well, you've seen examples like this where the photographer and camera are stationary and the subject has movement. Here you see ghost-like images of people as they move on the escalator. Well, what happens if the photographer is moving on the escalator? Both the photographer and camera are moving through something that is stationary. So the escalator steps look sharp as the camera and the steps are both moving together. But the sides of the escalator show the motion as the camera moves up and the sides do not. I had to try this one about 20 times. I was paddling solo. I had to paddle really hard to get the canoe moving and then lay back down low and grab my camera to take the shot. I had a lot of misses. This is that same canoe that Jim built. But you get the idea. The canoe is sharp as the camera is moving with the canoe while the grasses in the water appear to glide by. Okay, now we're going to take it up yet another level. The subject doesn't move, you do, but now a bit faster. What if you were in a car going 25 miles per hour while you pan a subject? As the car goes by, you rotate the camera to keep the subject in the frame. You do need two people to do this, a driver and a photographer, and you get this swirly, crazy rotation effect. I'm going to try to demonstrate. Hopefully you can see this here. Here's my tree. Okay, there's a tree. I'm in a car going along a street behind the tree, and as we approach the tree, I'm pointing my camera at the tree, and as the car goes by, I'm rotating my camera. Okay, so I'm keeping the camera pointed at that tree. So it's actually a combination of lateral movement and rotational movement. And it works great with colorful trees such as dogwoods or redbuds in spring, colorful trees in autumn. And you can also focus on other subjects. Here's a cabin in Valley Forge. You can see that rotational effect on the grass. Kind of looks like ghosts are leaving the cemetery. And sometimes it results in just a hurricane of texture and color. I love this type of photography. It makes me feel the excitement of connecting with the forest as I move through it. And it can be quite abstract, impressions of color, texture, in which details are dissolved by the motion. But in most cases, there's enough form retained to suggest a sense of subject. So here are the how-to notes if you want to try this. Again, these are on our website, but it's done from a moving car. You do need two people. Don't try this yourself. As you drive past the subject, keep pointing your camera at it. About 25 miles per hour, I think, works best. I have done it going 50 or 60 on a highway, about 1/15 of a second. And it does take a lot of practice, and you do get a lot of throwaways. Seriously, I might take 100 images to get one or two that I like. All right, let's get creative. Up until now, all images, with the exception of that falling salad, have been done in camera. No Photoshop necessary. Let's look at ways to create or simulate motion using some post-processing tools. This looks like a zoom blur. It's actually a fully focused sunflower. The radial blur was added in Photoshop. And I'm not going to get into any how-to specifics in Photoshop, as that would be a whole other presentation. I just want to share a few ideas of how you can use post-processing to simulate motion. I wanted to capture fireflies and create sort of a magical fairyland look. So I took about 20 shots, each one 6 seconds, to capture the movement of the lightning bugs. Then it's actually quite easy to blend them together as layers in Photoshop. Here I started with a normal shot of birch trees. And in this case, I added the blur in Photoshop. So this is different than the panning blurs we did before, because I wanted to add some of the bark texture back in. And here in the final image, you see just a hint of the texture of bark on those beautifully blurred trees. This is done by bringing both images into Photoshop as layers, just brushing a bit of the texture from one image onto the other. Remember this one done in camera using the long exposure and rear curtain sync. This motion blur was all done in post-processing by adding a blur filter in Photoshop. I love the solitude of this lonely figure walking on a shallow beach in Cape Cod. But here's the original image, dust spots and all. Not a great photo, but I liked the mood. So I decided just to give it a little boost in Photoshop. So I used a motion blur filter to smooth out the waves and then enhanced the color to create this serene scene. This is how I remember the magic of those endless patterns of the shallow waves. One of our favorite places to paddle a canoe is at Trap Pond in Delaware, where you can actually paddle through a forest of bald cypress trees. So I took this picture of Jim, but it's quite static, maybe a little bit cluttered or busy. Remember that cell phone app called Slow Shutter Cam? This is the next shot that I took. And I like the impressionistic look to the trees and the water, but the jumpy repeated image of Jim, that's kind of giving me a headache. So I decided to grab just the image of Jim in focus, gently blend it with the impressionistic image. And now your eye instantly rests on the in-focus person, enjoying a serene experience paddling through a painting by Renoir. Couple of images captured of skateboarders. This is FDR Park in Philadelphia. I liked the shadow in this one. This one caught in midair. A second later, he was on the ground. So these were done, of course, with a fast shutter speed. And I wondered if I could simulate the motion by using multiple images, similar to what Thomas Eakins did. So I stood in one place, put my camera on burst mode, and just kept clicking away. 13 images blended together in Photoshop. And I did the same with the snow geese at Middle Creek. This is about 30 separate exposures of images taken in burst mode and then combined in Photoshop. So as opposed to just freezing birds in flight, I think it gives the impression of movement. You can see the flight pattern as they move across the sky. And I think this one is my favorite. I think the pattern they made actually took on the shape of birds in flight. And I do want to share my thought process on a shot. Jim is in charge of workshops for our camera club, and he loves ballet. So he set up a photo workshop with the local ballet company called the Brandywine Ballet, and they provided the dancers in their studio. We had camera club members bring in studio lights, and it was a lot of fun. The dancers were amazing. I think everyone came away with shots they were happy with. I got quite a few as well. But in addition to shots like this one, I wanted to try something unique. There were 25 camera club members in the same place shooting the same poses. I wanted a shot that no one else in the group that day would have. I wanted this. Remember the story of Ansel Adams and visualization? The combination of imagination and technique. I wanted to show a progression of movements. I visualized this in advance. I had to plan what I needed to do. So how did I do this one? Most of the images were shot with a very fast shutter speed. That's why we brought all those high-powered lights. So you can see here, this image was shot to freeze the amazing Amanda at the height of a leap. Note the high ISO, 1/1000th of a second. Now look what happens when we go with a much longer shutter speed of 1/3 of a second. Now there is blur that indicates movement. It's a bad shot. I didn't want a two-faced Amanda, but I purposely put that in so you would see that you need to take a lot to get a few that you like. So here are the shots that I used straight out of camera. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that last one, I wanted her to face the opposite direction. So I turned it around, put them all together in Photoshop for the finished image. And a different technique to show motion, I took multiple images in succession and then brought them in as layers in Photoshop. And by lowering the opacity of some of the images, there's just a subtle sense of graceful movement. And this was done the same way. And sometimes I just like to experiment. I wondered what would happen if I put Amanda, the ballet dancer, inside one of my swirly hurricanes. And we drove by these giant wind turbines, and I thought, well, I could try the same technique here. So that's what, about 20 images combined in Photoshop. All right, the last series I will show are some examples of images that began in my imagination, and then I had to try to figure out how to create it. Not the final shot nor the final model. So now I want to set up a dramatic shot and recreate Lizzie Borden. Have you heard of her? Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. So I started by setting up the lighting and camera angle. Jim set up the side lighting to create that scary look. And I actually have the camera lying on the floor. You can see I'm triggering the remote control in my hand. So now I bring in the real model, our daughter Alex, and I try to get her to look menacing. She kept cracking up. And we took quite a few shots. So here I'm holding a fan to try to get her hair to fly up. First, I tried a hair dryer. That wasn't powerful enough. So I held up an electric fan, and that put some motion in her hair. And we're making adjustments to the lighting. We had some problems. The axe was casting a shadow across the side of her face. Okay, that's a bit better. I think I went with this one and did some editing. Finished image, Lizzie Borden makes me shudder. And another version from the same photo shoot in sepia to give it an old-time look. Still quite terrifying. And this is our other daughter, Kelsey. She looks a bit nicer, don't you think? So Jim and I watch a lot of photography videos, and we like to practice lighting. So Jim is much better at it than I am. He set up this soft box above Kelsey. I think that's beautiful light. And for Kelsey, I didn't use a fan. I brought in the leaf blower. And Jim put a couple of colored gels on the light. Again, just experimenting. And I asked her to pose with a lantern like she was afraid and running away. She plays a virtual game with friends called Pathfinders that includes dragons. So I envisioned a composite of her running through the forest, chased by a dragon. Then I photographed her Pathfinder dragon. Went into my archives, found an image of the redwood forest in Oregon, added a blue tone in Photoshop, and blended them together. Now I just need to add the dragon. And you know what? I don't like it. I think it just sort of looks stupid. So not everything goes according to plan. So I scrapped the dragon, but I still like the image. And I thought, let me change the crop a bit, add a light in the lantern, change the glow on her face to match the lantern light. Finished image, into the woods. And you can use your imagination as to what she is running from. All right, 2 more examples and we'll wrap this up. Our camera club has a fun summer challenge. A few years ago, the theme was song titles. We were assigned 10 different song titles to illustrate with our photography. You may know the song I Set Fire to the Rain by Adele. I immediately visualized the image I wanted to create. I wanted it to rain water and rain fire on me. So I started with a shot of me in front of one of our canoes. Jim also built this one. I cropped in. I will use this in the shot. Then I used the fire from that fire spinning workshop. And I'll use some of these sparks in the final image. Then I needed rain. I asked Jim to hold up the hose at the garden. And I practiced with different shutter speeds, fast, a bit slower, added some clarity in Lightroom. Now I had my rain. Next, I composited the rain, the sparks, and the image of me. If you look in the top right, you can see how I tilted the layers. All I need to do now is add some sparks on the umbrella. Finished image, I set fire to the rain. So these summer challenges are a lot of fun. Force us to think outside the box and get creative. I have done some wacky and embarrassing stuff. Here comes the last one. You may know the song, It's All About That Bass by Meghan Trainor. If you do, you know it's actually all about one's derriere. So an image popped into my mind. There was this rather famous image making its rounds on the internet of Kim Kardashian with her rather shapely butt. So yeah, I have no shame. I am going to try to replicate this shot of Kim Kardashian. I did this when Jim went out. I was too embarrassed to even let him know what I was doing. So you can see I am holding the remote. I'm trying different poses and I bring in the props. This is the one I went with. Remember those wine glasses with the splashing wine? Here they are again. Finished image? Yeah, it's pretty clear. I ain't no size 2, but I can shake it like I'm supposed to do because, you know, I'm all about that bass. So, yeah, we all get a bit stir crazy while stuck at home due to COVID, wildfire smoke, bad weather, whatever. There are so many photo techniques you can learn and try out at home. You don't need to travel. Just experiment, try something new, and have fun. And I have had fun giving this presentation to you, and I thank you. So to all of you, I say thank you. I will share one more image with my contact info. If you want to take a quick screenshot, our website is called letscapturethemoment.com. And if you go to the heading called Photo Fun, you will see more in-depth info on a lot of the techniques that I have covered. And again, you have access to a PDF that also has this information. My email is on there. If you have any questions after tonight, if you want to shoot me an email, please feel free to do so. And with that, I say thank you.
Betsy, thank you so much. It was very engaging with a lot of great information. I know we all learned a lot, and I know I'm going to watch that video again. And unlike Sandy, I think I'm going to stick with my single malt scotch to be creative.
Not my wine in a box, right?
All right, so Sandy, any questions for Betsy? And yeah, please consider making a donation to Flashes of Hope. Betsy, thank you again for donating the money. We hope you guys, if you enjoyed the presentation tonight, there's a link in the chat window, and we're also going to, after the Q&A or during the Q&A, you'll see a QR code like right here. So Sandy, take it away, and please consider making a donation, guys.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Well, Betsy, we have some questions along with all the compliments. I must say, it's really a joy to watch what the audience is saying. We will return to some of the more technical questions. What external flashes do you recommend?
Oh boy. I honestly can't answer that because my husband Jim is the flash expert. So I don't know. If that person wants to send me an email, I will be happy to get that information.
Yes, thank you. And that's what I was going to tell people. If we don't get to their question, that they can. Thank you. That's very generous of you, Betsy. Where is the camera with the scanner shots? How do you hold the camera?
Okay, the scanner is the camera. Just like if you're scanning a household document, you place the document on the flatbed scanner, the light goes from below it, and that's sensitizing something, that's exposing, it's grabbing your image from below inside that scanner. There's no camera involved. Great. Other than the scanner technically is a camera because it fits the definition of what photography is, but it's not a traditional camera.
Great. And what were the lens covers called that you were talking about? The natural density.
Okay, neutral density filters like this. The ones I have are from B&W Filter. You can get all sorts of different kinds of neutral density filters. Some are variable. These are stackable. If you really want to spend money, get ones that are affixed with magnets. They go on your camera much easier than mine do. So I know Stingray makes them. There are a few different manufacturers who make neutral density filters. It's basically like putting sunglasses on the front of your lens. It's blocking light. That's what it's doing.
Great. And moving on, is the rear curtain sync something you have to change on your camera, or is it just a normal flash?
It's a setting in your camera. Yes. I mean, there are different ways that you could do it. I mean, you can also do it manually where you keep your shutter open and then manually get a flash at the end. But in most cameras, there is a setting called rear curtain sync. And if you have your manual will also explain how to use it. Or you can also just go to YouTube and watch a gazillion YouTube videos on how to do it. But yes, most of you out there have a setting in your camera. Just look through your menus, rear curtain sync.
Great. And remember, Betsy, when you were showing the multiple flashes of you, did you use a black background?
Yes, when Jim and I first started experimenting with that, we had this sort of gray mottled background. But the last two shots that I showed where the background was very black, it is a photographer's background. It's just a huge black blanket, basically. It's sort of fleece. So there's
I think she is frozen. Oh, there you are.
You're back.
Am I back? Did you get that answer?
Not entirely. You were describing the background.
Okay, so the background when I did the when I was jumping around with that dark background, the first few images had a gray background, and then the last two had a black background, and it is a photographer's backdrop that we bought. It's basically a huge black blanket that is non-reflective. It's sort of like fleece, so it absorbs the light.
Good. And a question about the light your husband used. What was that image light your husband used?
He started out with a giant softbox kind of light. And again, if someone wants specifics, send me an email and I will get that to you, like what type of light specifically it is. He has a lot of different lights and I don't understand them all.
Okay. So it sounds like you're welcoming visitors to your website and messages. So it's very nice, Betsy. I have to say, Joanna in our audience is actually offering you an idea. Yeah, she said, have you ever tried being a ghost? I dressed in white on a dark night and walked out of the shot after a brief standing still or waved my arms.
I love it. I love it. I'll have to do that. I mentioned Uncle Dudley, the skeleton. We do quite a few photo shoots with Uncle Dudley. So I think a ghost would work very well with Uncle Dudley. Yeah, I'll try that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. Well, we're going to end the questions here, Betsy. And I have just been left with a sense of experimentation and play, have fun. I don't think I quite have the sense of play you do, but thank you so much, Betsy.
I thank all of you very much. Thank you.
And I too thank you. It's always a pleasure to work with you as you have new presentations. Please keep us in mind. And we wish you a wonderful holiday season.
Same to you and everyone else on the call. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Okay. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Please consider again making a donation to Flashes of Hope. We're going to leave this slide up here for about 4 or 5 minutes. And all of you, we hope to see you next month and hope you have a very special holiday season. So take care, everybody.